The first thing most travelers notice in Vietnam now is not the traffic, the food, or even the skyline. It is the strange feeling that the country is changing faster than their memory can keep up with, as if entire neighborhoods evolve between one visit and the next while familiar streets quietly disappear behind glass towers, new rail systems, luxury apartments, and endless construction cranes stretching across the horizon. A traveler who visited Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City just 5 years ago often arrives expecting the same atmosphere they remember, only to realize almost immediately that something feels completely different now. The coffee shops are more modern, the airports are larger, the roads are more crowded with electric vehicles, and entire districts that once felt local and quiet suddenly feel international, ambitious, and intensely competitive. What surprises many tourists is that Vietnam's transformation does not feel slow or gradual the way change happens in many countries. It feels compressed, accelerated, and almost restless, like the country is racing against time to build its future before the rest of the world fully realizes what is happening here. That speed creates a strange emotional contrast for visitors because traces of old Vietnam still exist everywhere at the exact same time. One street can still feel deeply traditional with elderly residents cooking outside tiny homes, while the next block already looks like the financial district of a modern global city filled with luxury brands, rooftop bars, and tech offices. For many travelers, the shock comes from realizing Vietnam no longer feels like an emerging destination hidden quietly in Southeast Asia. It increasingly feels like a country stepping aggressively onto the world stage, and tourists are witnessing that transformation in real time before their eyes. The biggest reason this change feels so intense is because Vietnam's economic growth has been relentless over the last decade. Factories, international investment, tourism, technology, manufacturing, and foreign businesses have poured into the country at a pace that has dramatically reshaped both daily life and the physical landscape itself. In cities like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, construction rarely seems to stop anymore. Massive apartment towers rise beside older neighborhoods, luxury shopping malls appear in areas that once held local markets, and highways continue expanding outward as more Vietnamese families enter the middle class and gain access to lifestyles that barely existed a generation ago. What makes this especially fascinating is how young Vietnam feels compared to many aging economies around the world. The country has a huge population of ambitious young people who grew up connected to smartphones, social media, global culture, and international business trends, creating a generation that sees rapid change not as something frightening but as something exciting and necessary. That youthful energy changes the atmosphere tourists experience the moment they arrive. Cafes are filled with remote workers, university students, startup founders, online sellers, and creators building businesses directly from laptops while global brands compete aggressively for Vietnamese consumers who are spending more money than ever before. Many Western travelers still arrive expecting Vietnam to feel inexpensive in the same way it did years ago. Then they suddenly notice premium coffee prices, upscale restaurants, luxury condos, imported vehicles, and high-end rooftop experiences appearing everywhere around them, especially in central urban districts. The old image of Vietnam as purely a low-cost backpacker destination is slowly fading in certain areas of the country. Budget travel still exists, but alongside it now sits a rapidly growing luxury market aimed at wealthier tourists, digital nomads, foreign investors, and an expanding Vietnamese middle class that increasingly wants modern convenience and premium experiences. Around the 3-minute mark of a trip through modern Vietnam, many travelers experience a moment that completely changes their perspective. They realize the country is not simply becoming more developed, it is becoming more competitive, more confident, and far more globally connected than outsiders expected. That realization becomes even stronger inside airports, shopping centers, and business districts where English signage, international chains, digital payment systems, and high-speed delivery services now operate with surprising efficiency. Visitors who expected a slower-moving developing country suddenly find themselves in an environment that often feels more technologically adaptive than parts of the West. At the same time, Vietnam has managed to preserve an unusual level of street-level energy that many highly modernized countries eventually lose. Sidewalk food stalls still operate late into the night, scooters still dominate the roads, and families still gather outside small businesses in ways that give cities a strong sense of life and movement. This combination of rapid modernization and surviving local identity is exactly what fascinates many travelers right now. Vietnam feels modern enough to shock first-time visitors, yet still chaotic and human enough to avoid feeling sterile or overly polished. Tourism itself has also become part of the transformation. Millions of visitors continue arriving each year searching for affordable travel, food culture, beaches, nightlife, and social media-worthy experiences, but tourism demand has also pushed prices upward in many areas while changing the atmosphere of certain destinations. Places like Da Nang, Hoi An, and Nha Trang now balance local life with rapidly expanding tourism infrastructure. Beachfront resorts continue growing, international restaurants multiply, and local businesses increasingly adapt themselves toward foreign visitors and global trends. Some travelers love this evolution because it makes Vietnam easier, cleaner, and more comfortable to navigate than before. Others quietly feel that parts of the country are losing some of the raw unpredictability and slower atmosphere that once made Vietnam feel deeply unique compared to other destinations in Asia. That emotional divide is becoming increasingly common among repeat visitors. Older travelers often compare Vietnam today with memories from 10 or 15 years ago and speak about disappearing neighborhoods, changing social dynamics, and rising prices that make certain cities feel very different from the country they first experienced. But for younger Vietnamese people, the transformation often represents opportunity rather than loss. Better infrastructure, stronger wages, modern transportation, global business connections, and expanding industries create possibilities that previous generations simply never had access to. Around the 4-minute mark of understanding modern Vietnam, another realization begins to emerge. The country's transformation is not only economic, it is psychological, because Vietnam increasingly behaves like a nation that believes it has momentum on its side. That confidence shows up everywhere from local entrepreneurship to education, technology, fashion, and even social attitudes toward success. Young Vietnamese professionals increasingly speak about international careers, investment, property ownership, startups, and global mobility with a level of ambition that surprises many outsiders. Vietnam's manufacturing sector has also become one of the most important reasons global attention toward the country continues growing rapidly. As international companies diversify supply chains away from China, Vietnam has emerged as a major alternative manufacturing hub for electronics, textiles, consumer products, and technology assembly. This shift brings enormous economic advantages, but it also increases pressure on cities, infrastructure, and housing markets. Traffic congestion, pollution, overcrowding, and rising living costs are becoming more visible issues, especially in fast-growing urban areas where development often moves faster than planning can fully control. Travelers notice this tension constantly because Vietnam now feels like two realities existing simultaneously. One reality is the excitement of growth, opportunity, modernization, and rising prosperity, while the other is the visible pressure that rapid expansion places on daily life and traditional communities. In many neighborhoods, old family-owned homes stand directly beside luxury developments worth millions of dollars. Elderly residents still practice routines unchanged for decades while younger generations work remotely for international companies from sleek cafes filled with modern technology and global branding. Climate pressure is another challenge shaping Vietnam's future faster than many tourists realize. Rising sea levels, flooding risks, extreme heat, pollution, and environmental strain increasingly affect parts of the country, especially as urban growth continues accelerating alongside industrial expansion. Yet despite these challenges, Vietnam still projects an unusually strong sense of forward momentum compared to many countries facing economic uncertainty. There is a visible national energy built around growth, adaptation, and advancement that travelers often describe as difficult to fully explain until they experience it themselves. One reason Vietnam fascinates so many tourists right now is because it still feels like a country in motion rather than a finished product. Cities are evolving, industries are shifting, tourism is expanding, and entire districts continue transforming so quickly that even locals sometimes struggle to recognize how much has changed within a few years. For content creators and travelers, that creates a strange urgency because many visitors feel they are witnessing a temporary moment in history. They want to experience Vietnam before another wave of modernization arrives and changes the atmosphere once again. The irony is that this exact feeling has repeated itself for years now. Every generation of travelers believes they are seeing the last version of Vietnam before it changes forever, only for the country to continue evolving into something even more unexpected afterward. What makes Vietnam different from many rapidly developing destinations is that the country still retains an unusually strong cultural rhythm underneath all the modernization. Morning markets still open before sunrise, local food culture still dominates everyday life, and family structures remain deeply influential across society despite the rise of global consumer culture. That balance between tradition and acceleration may ultimately become Vietnam's greatest strength. Tourists are not just visiting for luxury hotels or cheap prices anymore. Many are arriving because Vietnam still feels emotionally alive in a way that heavily commercialized destinations sometimes lose over time. The next decade will likely transform Vietnam even further. More infrastructure projects, faster transportation systems, growing international investment, expanding tourism, and deeper global influence are all expected to continue reshaping the country at extraordinary speed. For travelers returning after several years away, the experience may become even more shocking than it already is today. Familiar districts could vanish behind modern developments, new transport systems may completely alter how cities function, and entire coastal regions may evolve into major international tourism hubs. Yet even with all this change, Vietnam still carries a sense of resilience that many visitors remember long after leaving. Beneath the construction cranes, luxury developments, and expanding skylines, there remains a country shaped by endurance, adaptability, and an ability to reinvent itself repeatedly without fully losing its identity. That may be the real reason Vietnam is changing faster than tourists expected. It is not simply because buildings are rising quickly or businesses are growing rapidly, but because the country itself seems deeply determined to move forward while much of the world is only beginning to notice how fast that movement has already become. And for travelers arriving today, the most unforgettable part is realizing they are not looking at Vietnam's future anymore. They are already standing inside it, while it continues evolving around them almost faster than anyone expected possible. Before your next trip through Southeast Asia, there is a good chance Vietnam will already feel different again. And that feeling alone may be the clearest sign of just how quickly the country is transforming now.